today I decided to go on Pinterest for whatever reason, and I searched up hamster cages because I was trying to get some inspiration for my own hamster cage. And then I thought of the idea of reacting to some cages, so that's what we're going to be doing today. First cage here is a critter trail attached to a bin cage. The first thing I don't like about this cage is the tubes. They are extremely tiny, and even like a dwarf hamster would find it really uncomfortable to climb up, and especially because they're kind of like going upwards and it's kind of just really hard to climb up. Also, the bedding amount, like in the critter trail, there's literally just a bit like a layer of bedding, which isn't even enough. And like in the bin cage, there's literally not even the whole floor is covered. So, yeah. Because of like the actual level that the little door thing is put at, it's kind of like you can't even fill it up to the optimal amount of bedding. I would overall rate this cage a 3 out of 10. So the next cage that we have here looks like two bin cages attached together with a tube. So this time looking at it, I do think there is enough floor space in the cage. But again, at the same time, connecting the cages in this way on top of each other creates broken floor space, and the hamster can't actually enjoy just like the floor space in one width, but he has to kind of like climb up. And again, you will see this in most of the cages, but the bedding isn't deep enough, and I think this is because, as you can see, the little openings of the tubes are pretty low, so you can't really fill it up that much. Overall, I will rate this a 5 out of 10. So the next cage is actually quite an interesting one. It looks like they have like a little tiny pet store cage attached to an aquarium, which still isn't big enough. And even though you're thinking, wow, like, two cages attached, it must at least be big enough. Well, it's not. So I went ahead and searched up this cage, and here are the measurements given. So it's not that big of a cage, and then if we actually do the maths, assuming that there's around 200 I want to say like 20 inches squared of floor space in the aquarium, it would come to around 440 square inches of floor space, which is not even the bare minimum for a cage, which in America is 450 square inches of floor space, and in England is around 600 inches. Also, the wheel in that smaller cage is definitely not big enough. I'm gonna overall rate this cage a 5 out of 10. So the next cage that we have is actually a really good cage. It looks pretty big to me. I would say there is around 800 to 900 solid square inches of floor space there, and I love that there is enough bedding for your hamster to burrow in. So there is a little burrowing tunnel, and I can see that there's some sprays, which is obviously great. I did zoom in and I can see that there's like, I think that's sand or a substrate, so I like how that's set up there. Overall, I'm giving this cage a 10. So next up we have this cage. Again, it does look like there is like genuinely enough floor space with those two bin cages. However, because they're kind of like broken up with the tube, it's kind of creating a broken floor space. Of course, having two bin cages is better than just having one, but it would be more ideal to make to kind of combine them so it doesn't create broken floor space. Apart from that, I mean, because it's kind of from the top view, I can't really see how much bedding there is. I think there is enough bedding. I like that they have used a big wheel. The only thing I will say is kind of use the cages effectively, because like in the biggest cage, I think there's 5 accessories, and you can definitely fit more. So kind of just add some more chew toys or some herbs or sprays, little twigs, something like that, just to fill up the space a bit more. Overall, this cage is getting a 8 out of 10. So the next cage that we have here is an aquarium styled cage. The only thing that I'll really say to this cage is that the little burrowing area with the white paper bedding there, I would make that bigger and deeper. This is because you'll find that your hamster is most likely to burrow more if the bedding is in a bigger part of the cage. I'm giving this cage a 7.5 out of 10. So the next cage that I have here is a bin cage. Again, this is kind of getting repetitive, but there is not enough bedding in this cage. I want to say that that's a substrate. I'm thinking beach chips. It might not be, but to me it looks like it, so yeah. Apart from that, I think the wheels are a bit small, and because there's 2 wheels and 2 hearts, I'm thinking that there is either like 2 dwarfs or something in this cage, which I really wouldn't recommend, but yeah. This cage is getting a 6 out of 10. So next up we have another good cage. I can't tell how much bedding is in here, but apart from that, I can see there's quite a big wheel there. There's also some sprays, and I can see some moss, which is great. And again, there's some like wooden stuff, and just a generally really nice natural setup. This cage is getting a 10. So now this is one of those cages, again, where like 2 bin cages combined, so much floor space. But in reality, this is just a broken floor space. And just looking at those tubes makes me feel so uncomfortable. Like, the actual angle they're put at and how small they are just makes me feel so uncomfortable. Also, a lot of the times, hamsters have escaped from tubes like these, so I definitely would not recommend them. Again, even though I've said this a billion times, there is not enough bedding for a hamster to burrow. It's not deep enough, and you definitely need some more. As for the actual cage, I can't really see what's inside. But I mean, I don't think I see anything that looks unsafe. This cage is getting a 7.5 out of 10. The next cage is quite an interesting one too. It looks like they've attached the top of a hamster cage to a bin cage. For me personally, actually this cage isn't half bad. I can see that the bedding is kind of sloping upwards, so I do think that there is enough bedding. I can see that I think that's some brown paper bedding, and there is quite a few wooden shoes in there. And overall, this is quite a good cage, so I would rate this a 9 out of 10. So the next cage, as it says in the little description, is a cheap, homemade, multi-story hamster house. There is just quite a bit of things that are just wrong with this. So the first big red flag is the hamster ball on top of the cage. Technically, this isn't like really part of the cage, but I just really quickly wanted to say this because they can cause a hamster's feet to be injured, and honestly an exercise ball does not provide that much exercise as a playpen or going outside in a bathtub, for example, will do. Then again, as I've said a lot of times in this video, because this is on 3 different levels, the floor space, I mean, there might be enough floor space, possibly, I don't know, because there is no measurements, but this still is creating floor space. So whether or not there would have been enough floor space, it isn't okay because it's creating a broken floor space. Also, the bedding amount, even in that like one singular cage down there, isn't enough. So even here you can see the ideal amount of bedding is around 10 inches. Although one thing I do like about this cage is that they have a flying saucer and what looks to be a suitably sized wheel, which means that the hamster can pick either if they want to go on the flying saucer or the wheel. Overall, I'm going to give this cage a 6.5 out of 10. So this cage I especially quite liked because it was different and nothing that I had actually ever seen before. I think it's supposed to be like a jungle theme, and I can see they have a spider plant, which is great for enrichment, and a nice big wheel. Also, I do love the ladder, but I would personally be a bit more careful because obviously hamsters have a terrible depth perception and they could fall off that. So just be careful with that, and I would personally put it a bit lower. I can also see some substrates in the front, and even though there isn't too much bedding there, I think I can see some in the back bit of the cage. Either way, this is a 9.5 out of 10. Finally, we have this cage, which is quite similar to a cage that I rated earlier. It has the kind of cage top connected to a bin cage. Honestly, the bedding amount that you have in this cage isn't too bad, but I would just add a bit more if I was you. And then I think I can see a flying saucer there. I would recommend, I don't know if there is a wheel too. I don't think I see a wheel, but if there isn't a wheel in this cage, I would recommend also adding a wheel in case your hamster prefers wheels instead of flying saucers. And also, I think that's a millet spray hanging from the wire, which is obviously good enrichment. I would just add a few more chews and stuff like that because there is quite a bit of empty space. But overall, this cage gets an 8 out of 10. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!